Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the LEA Special Education Point of Contact monthly webinar for September. My name is Tiffany Ingram. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We have a full presentation for you. We do have, if you check out in our handouts tab of GoToWebinar, you will see two handouts. The first is going to be a copy of our presentation today here from the Aussie team. And we have a very exciting special guest here from the Ability Challenge. Sarah is here to share a lot about the outcomes of their professional community of practice from last year and sharing a lot of resources around accelerated learning for diverse learners. We will hear from her at the end of our presentation here from the Aussie team. So please join us. For that, our webinar today will end at 11:30. So we will have time for all of our amazing presenters and the wealth of knowledge that they're going to share with us this morning. Our agenda for today, we've done our introductions. We have updates from our policy team. We have some SEDS updates and reminders. You'll also hear from the IDA monitoring team, some updates and reminders from there as well. You'll hear from our correctional facilities and updates around that for IDEA. And we'll also hear about child outcome summary updates. We have some updates from our non-public team, assessments and transportation updates. And we have some amazing announcements and reminders from our teaching and learning team as well. We're going to hop right in, and I will turn it over to Christy to share with us our policy reminder and updates.
Good morning, everyone. This is Christy Weaver-Harris. I'm the Policy Manager in OSSE's Division of K-12 Systems and Supports in the Office of Special Education. There's a lot going on in the policy world this month, so bear with me while we have a good number of slides here. So I'm excited to share that OSSE has released a second proposed rulemaking for Chapter 30. Chapter 30 are the regulations that govern the education of students with disabilities in the district. It establishes requirements for eligibility and special education processes that apply to all students and LEAs in DC. This has been a years-long project, and we appreciate everyone who has provided input so far. Please stay engaged because this is another opportunity to have your voice heard. The proposed regulations are open for a 30-day public comment period, and we really want to hear from school-based folks about their opinions and feedback on the proposed regulations. Public comment closes on October 4th, and we will hold two public hearings on September 27th in the middle of the day and in September 29th in the evening. If you would like to attend public hearings, the registration links are here. I will also drop those links and a bunch of other links in the chat. And if you want to submit written public comment, you can do so by sending that to me, either directly or at ossie.publiccomment@dc.gov. You can also mail it to me. There's a lot of ways to get it to us. Next slide, please. So the proposed regulations are 120 pages, plus 40 pages of a preamble, which explains OSSE's responses to the first round of comment on the proposed regulations. Because this is a second rulemaking, it's formatted essentially in track changes. So it shows changes from the first proposal, but it does not show changes from like our current requirements to the second proposal. I know that can make it tough to review, so I wanted to highlight a few major areas of change, and this is a mix of major changes from both the current requirements and since the first proposed rulemaking. So the first change that I want to highlight for you is that we are proposing to extend eligibility for all students. Currently, eligibility ends at the end of the semester in which a student turns age 22. We are proposing to extend that through the end of the school year in which the student turns age 22. For reevaluations, we are proposing a timeline that requires you to complete a reevaluation within 60 days of parent consent. So that would be for reevaluations that occur outside of the triennial. So if you're doing a reevaluation at any other time, you are still required to complete a reevaluation within 3 years of the prior evaluation. These proposed regulations also will allow IEP teams to designate a primary and secondary disability. That is a point of feedback that we have heard from schools directly. So that's something that you have been able to drive change in. We've also made substantial changes to eligibility criteria from current requirements. So I really, really strongly encourage you to send at least that section to your school psychologists for review and feedback. We are really making some major changes here, including changing how multiple disabilities is identified. We are doing away with the choose your own adventure from list A and list B, and we are reducing the threshold for SLD from 2 standard deviations to 1.5 standard deviations. So these are like highly technical changes that we are making, and I really encourage you to make sure that these regulations are getting in front of your school psychs. This is not a major change from the first proposal, but I want to flag in general that these proposed regulations establish minimum requirements for the IEP certificate of completion. So the regs here propose that either the LEA establishes its own policy around requirements for IEP certificate of completion, or you are required to adopt the criteria that's established in these regulations, in these proposed regulations. So you as an LEA could develop your own requirements, or you must adopt ours. Something else that was changed from the first proposal is that in the first proposal we had qualifications, we were proposing qualifications for paraprofessionals. We have removed that from this rulemaking due to concerns about workforce and fiscal impacts. And that was a direct result of public comment that we received on those requirements from schools. So thank you again for your input on that. And the proposed regs also establish requirements for seclusion and restraint. It adopts and amends the current non-public requirements. So take a look at those sections too. Again, these are just a few areas that I wanted to highlight. There are changes throughout. I encourage you to review the whole thing. If you want to see more information about OSSE's responses to public comment from the first round and like why we made the changes that we made, you can find that in the first 40 pages. It's in the preamble. It's organized by section, so it's not super hard to find. I know that many LEAs organize their comments in groups or through organizations such as the Special Education Cooperative, so be sure that you're engaging in that process too. And we have some additional resources on our website, which I will also drop this link directly in the chat. On that site, we have a memo that runs through the background of this and the history of the regulations. There's also a link to the full text. There's a link to the red line version and to the preamble. So you'll also see in the preamble that we have reserved comments for the development of policy and guidance. In many instances, we received recommendations or suggestions on the regulations that were too specific or granular to be included in regulation. So after Chapter 30 is done, we will start the very important work of updating all of our special education policies, and we are actually reserving those comments to be considered when we're updating those policies. So if you've previously submitted comment or you are aware of comment that was previously submitted and you don't see those changes in the regulations, it is highly likely that those comments will be taken into consideration, and you may see them in upcoming policies. Next slide, please. So last month, I gave a heads up that we would be releasing an updated school year guidance, and on August 24th, we actually did release a new special education FAQ for the 21-22 school year. It addresses LEA obligations as you've returned to in-person instruction, including information on medical exemptions, comp services, accelerated learning, and procedural flexibilities for LEAs. I'm going to give a really quick overview of what the guidance says, but please make sure that you are reviewing that yourself. Again, I will drop that link in the chat. I have like a whole list of links that I'm going to drop in the chat as soon as I'm done. Next slide. Okay, so the FAQ addresses medical exemptions for students with disabilities, including restating the Department of Education guidance that a medical exemption constitutes a change in placement. For students who are attending non-public schools, we encourage the LEA and the non-public to collaborate to determine service provision in that instance. So related to student quarantine, if a student is ordered to quarantine for 10 consecutive school days or more, the IEP team must convene to review the student's placement. And again, this is guidance that's coming from the Department of Education that's really reliant on the IDEA provision that any exclusion from school for 10 consecutive school days is a change in placement, which is why this guidance, you'll see change in placement throughout this guidance. It's because the Department of Education released guidance last year restating that any exclusion for 10 days is considered a change in placement. So LEA FAPE obligations are implicated in that 10-day requirement. If the period of quarantine is for 9 or fewer days, you must ensure equal access to educational opportunities for students with disabilities. Meaning if you're providing any level of educational service to general education students, if you are doing distance learning while students are quarantined, then special education students must have equal access to the educational opportunities that you are offering. Next slide, please. So the guidance has quite a few questions on compensatory services. Previous guidance, I want to clarify something here that's important to note, that previous guidance on compensatory services did not differentiate between instances in which students did not receive any services and instances in which students received services through distance or hybrid learning, which is why you're going to see different answers from us on this issue. Compensatory services determinations are not required for every single student, but must be considered in instances where the child did not receive any services. Think of this as similar to your missed services analysis that are addressed in OSSE's related services policy. So like when a student misses a service, you have to determine the impact on the student's ability to access FAPE. However, IEP teams need to be responsive to parents on these issues. So if a parent is requesting a meeting to talk about compensatory services or to discuss accelerated learning or with concerns about learning loss, make sure that you're convening those meetings and that you're considering parent input, because that's going to get you really far with those relationships with parents. I know I went through that really quickly. Please take a look at the guidance yourself. If you have any questions about that guidance document, please reach out to me directly or to my team at ossie.dsepolicy@dc.gov. Next slide, please. So OSSE also released 2 Dear Colleague letters the week of August 24th discussing recovery and accelerated learning for students at non-public schools. So LEAs should be considering students who are attending non-public schools in their planning and budgeting, and use of stimulus funds you can use your stimulus funds to support service delivery for students attending non-public schools. We encourage LEAs and non-publics to collaborate on recovery and accelerated services. And as a reminder, as part of LEA continuous education planning, LEAs are responsible for collecting and reviewing non-public school service delivery plans related to accelerated learning to ensure that those plans are adequate to address student needs. These letters are available on OSSE's COVID-19 resource page, which is another thing I will drop in the chat. And when you go to that resource page, you want to click on K-12 LEAs in schools and then scroll down to where it says serving students with disabilities. And that's where all of our COVID-related resources are. That also includes the FAQ that I was just speaking about a second ago. Next slide, please. As a general reminder, we have 4 newish guidance documents available on our website that address ESY, medical assessments as part of IDEA evaluations, eligibility criteria for visual impairment, and toileting skills. I do want to take a moment to address LEA obligations related to toileting skills. It is likely that you got an email from me about this yesterday. OSSE reminds LEAs that you may not exclude children from enrollment or discriminate against a child based on the inability to complete toileting tasks or delays in toileting due to a known or suspected disability. So excluding or failing to accommodate children in those instances may constitute discrimination and violation of federal civil rights laws, such as Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act and Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. If a child's lack of toilet training is or may be due to a disability, the LEA must provide reasonable accommodations or appropriate services under IDEA to assist that child. Or if you have a student who is having difficulty with toileting and you suspect that the child may be a student with a disability, this could be something that triggers for you, oh man, maybe this kid needs an initial evaluation. You have child find obligations for that child under IDEA. We've heard of a few instances of this becoming an issue at schools. That's why you got an email from me about it yesterday. So please make sure that you're reviewing that guidance and that you are updating LEA policies and handbooks to address non-discrimination on this basis. So something that you may want to look at are like exceptions to your toileting requirements, your definition of school readiness, and also your child find policies and obligations. You want to be considering the guidance that we have around this when you're making those policies and handbooks. So please make sure that you're paying attention to that because it has become an issue as of late. Next slide, please. Again, a reminder for the 21-22 school year, LEAs continue to be required to document the first provision of specialized instruction for students under the age of 6 who have specialized instruction prescribed on the IEP, but for whom it has not been previously documented, including students who are transitioning from Part C at or around age 3, or from an extended IFSP at or around the age of 4, and students ages 3 through 5 who are newly determined eligible in your LEA, including students who are transferring from out of state. So some caveats to this is that you're not required to document specialized instruction for or on an ongoing basis after a student's IEP has been revised, unless if the student's speech-only IEP has been amended to add specialized instruction, you need to document the first provision of that specialized instruction. I know that speech-only IEPs, speech is considered specialized instruction in that instance. For our data purposes, we need you to be documenting that specialized instruction if it gets added to a speech-only IEP. Students younger than age of 6 who are continuing within your LEA or who are transferring from another LEA, but who have previously received specialized instruction and have documentation of it. If a student is transferring from another LEA, if you are only required to document specialized instruction if the previous LEA did not document it. So if the student does not have documentation of it, you need to be doing that. You can check if a student has previous documentation of specialized instruction in the SEDS document tab. If you have any questions about that, that's another thing you can reach out to my team or anyone on the monitoring team for any questions. Next slide, please. Last year, OSSE released a model poster to support LEA child find activities. Now that we've returned to school buildings, please make sure that your LEA is posting these posters or similar information in an area where parents can see it. LEAs can download a printable version of this from our website, and we mailed printed posters to all charter LEAs who serve students ages 3 through 5 like 2 weeks ago in the last couple of weeks. Next slide, please. Each of those mailings contained posters in English, Spanish, and any additional languages that were relevant for your LEA. Again, please note that school sites must post these posters in areas that are visible to families, and you need to be taking into consideration COVID restrictions that may limit parent or family access to the building. So make sure you're posting in a place where parents can see it, even if they have limited access to your building. Posters must remain posted at all times. You cannot remove them during like mid-year cleanups, like your holiday cleanup, or at the end of year cleanup. This is information that we want available to parents at all times, please. If you have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out to me directly. Next slide. In September 2020, OSSE announced its partnership with the Ability Challenge to convene and facilitate a special education community of practice that was initially focused on aligning specialized instruction strategies to general education content during distance learning, and then shifted towards focusing on student data collection and planning for the delivery of accelerated learning. So COP members from LEAs across the district engaged in collective resource sharing. They shared key wins, and drove some positive momentum, including using the COP to plan and implement school improvement projects in those areas and others. Next slide. As a result of that collaborative work, OSSE is offering, in partnership with ABC, a 2-part learning series to support LEA planning for recovery and accelerated learning for diverse learners. Series 1 addresses planning for accelerated learning and supports the design of accelerated learning strategies for students with disabilities. And Series 2 addresses special education improvement through continuous learning and supports the design of ongoing student evaluation and recovery planning activities. Next slide, please. The next steps for your LEA are to participate in this learning series to support implementation of your LEA's continuous education plan. We also encourage you to visit the learning series blog for additional resources or contact Sarah from the Ability Challenge for assistance. And Sarah is going to be joining us at the end of the webinar to discuss the work that the Ability Challenge has been doing with OSSE. All right, those are all of my slides. I'm going to drop a bunch of links in the chat. If you have any questions, make sure you're posting those and we will go through them at the end of the webinar. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Christy. And again, if anybody has any questions throughout this entire presentation, feel free to drop them in the chat. Folks are here to answer your questions, and we will be able to have Q&A at the conclusion of our webinar today. I'm going to turn it over to Rita now to share some SEDS announcements and updates.
Great, thank you so much, Tiffany. Hi, my name is Rita Larkins in the CIO's office. I'll be giving you some SEDS updates and announcements for September. And we just want to do a quick reminder to everyone about some of the SEDS administrative tasks that are required at the start of the year. Next slide. Some folks may not have had an opportunity to go ahead and transition to the new school year. Just relating that to what Christy was saying about documents. If you have not yet transitioned to the new school year, staff may not be able to access documents that were newly created this year. So you want to make sure that you're transitioned to the correct school year. Also, updating your school system reporting periods. And we're going to go to the next slide. Okay, so as I was talking about, just making sure that the system has rolled over to the next school year, you should be in the 21-22 school year. There are just a few schools, I'm not going to call out any names, that have not done that yet. So please go ahead and do that so that staff are able to access documents in the correct school year. And you can move to the next two slides. Okay. You also want to make sure that we have updated reporting periods. So if you're doing progress reports, which I'm sure everyone is, you need to put in the progress reporting periods into eSchool Plus. So again, you'll go back to that calendar page and edit your reporting periods. Next slide, Tiffany. As another task for the start of school year, you also want to do a quick user audit. You're really just removing any users that no longer need access to your LEA. And you can find that under the users tab. So you'll remove those folks that are no longer working at the LEA, or if they are a non-public user who no longer needs access to that student's file. Next slide. And just as a reminder, you never want to modify any of the state level accounts that you see under your users tab. Remember, those are OSSE staff accounts that are used to help and support you when you have issues in the system. Next slide. Okay, next slide. All right, and just as a reminder, if you are bringing back an employee, folks that are deleted in the system or users that are inactivated or never really removed, they just go into an inactive status. So you certainly have the ability to reactivate a user in the system. So you want to search to make sure they're not in the system before you create that new account. Next slide. Want to touch just a moment on caseload administration. We have gotten a few tickets about this. Just as a reminder, OSSE does not set up caseloads for LEAs. That is the responsibility of the SPED POC. Also, to make sure that you have provided that access for your non-public users. So caseload administration is going to help you set up caseloads for users at your LEA, and caseload setup wizard, of course, will help you set up your own caseload. Next slide. Also, as a reminder, if you are having problems with any areas of the system in SEDS, we do have a resource for you to reach out for help and support, and that is the OSSE support tool. Next slide. You have the ability to go in and create a ticket. Now, everybody at the LEA is not able to do that, only the SPED POC and people with related access. You also have a non-public POC that also has access to create OST tickets. Next slide. So as some of the final system updates I want to share with you before I close out, as a reminder, we are encouraging the use of the upload feature in SEDS. We talked about this a little bit as we closed out last school year around the Medicaid workaround and for getting the consent into the system with the Easy Facts. We're trying to really move folks away from using Easy Facts. So whenever possible, try to use the upload feature in SEDS. Also, you'll notice a change on the Update IEP tab. The Visual Impairment Disability worksheet has some updated language. And then you'll see those changes that we made last year, just reminding you all for the service logging screens. Remember, you have the ability to differentiate if the service was in person or if it was remote service. And then finally, there is a new transportation report, which is unfiltered. And you'll see that listed in your reports in SEDS. All right, that's it for me. Thank you. And I'll take any questions that you might have on these administrative tasks. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Rita. We are now going to turn it over to Karen, and she's going to share some IDEA monitoring reminders and updates.
Thank you, Tiffany. Good morning, everybody. This is Karen Morgan Donaldson with IDEA Monitoring and Compliance. And I have a handful of slides that I'm going to go through. If you could go to the next slide, please. So this slide outlines all monitoring and technical assistance in the area of IDEA Part B compliance for the remainder of this school year. I want to highlight one change within this monitoring calendar. Child find monitoring for 3 to 5-year-old students will now be taking place during the month of November. So that is one change within the calendar for the remainder of the school year that I wanted to highlight. Next slide. IDEA Part B determinations will be issued this month via QuickBase through the OSSE IDEA determinations application. Quick note that access will be provided to LEA head of school, your data POC, and your LEA SPED POC. Please make sure that all new and, if necessary, existing staff are properly entered and coded within eSchool Plus to ensure that they receive access to this application. Next slide. This slide gives you a brief overview of IDEA Part B determinations. All states are required to make annual determinations on each LEA's implementation of IDEA Part B. So when making determinations, OSSE considers different elements that are required by the Department of Education, as well as other metrics that are relevant to IDEA. You can think about determinations as your LEA's report card for special education. So for each federal fiscal year, OSSE calculates each LEA's points based on designated criteria and assigns the following determinations: needs requirements, needs assistance, needs intervention, and needs substantial intervention. Next slide. OSSE has given special consideration to the impact of COVID-19 on school operations during the 1920 school year and has therefore made adjustments to the determinations rubric to include the following changes. So points will be waived for element 7, which is participation in statewide assessments. Also revising the review period timelines for point assignments for element 1 APR indicators. That includes our indicator 11, which is initial evaluation, and indicator 12, which is C2B transition. So the modification here is that OSSE will review data between July 1st, 2019 to March 13th, 2020, which is the day, the last day before the schools closed. So again, this is for federal fiscal year 2019 that we're talking about for our determinations. Additionally, OSSE is making the following change as part of an overall process improvement. So for element 1, which is APR indicator 4B, significant discrepancy, and indicators 9 and 10, which is disproportionate representation, there will no longer be an NA option. So LEAs that were not flagged for review under these 3 indicators will receive the full number of points allowable in those areas for the determination. And if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to me separately or put a question in the chat. Next slide, please. So this leads to our new equity requirements under IDEA. This is a new initiative that we've had on our team. The U.S. Department of Education, OSSE, requires that states collect and examine data to determine if significant disproportionality, significant discrepancy, and disproportionate representation is occurring in the state, as well as local education agencies within the state. So shortly, by the end of this month, OSSE will be sending out notification letters to LEAs that meet the criteria for significant disproportionality, significant discrepancy, and disproportionate representation. So while each equity requirement has distinct definitions, criteria, and calculations, OSSE is aligning the timing and the methodologies, district identification responses, and corrective actions for each of these equity requirements when appropriate. So more information can be found at the website that is included here, this link about the alignment of these three equity requirements. And my last slide is a quick reminder about some upcoming trainings that we have. There is a mandatory training for LEAs that serve 3 to 5-year-old students. The first one is this Friday, and the next one is, the second one is next Thursday. And then we are providing training on Special Ed Connection. LRP, the vendor, is actually providing these trainings. We have already held one. The next one is September 22nd, which is next Wednesday. If you have any questions about these trainings or how to register, please let me know. Karen Morgan, or Karen.Morgan-Donaldson@dc.gov. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. We are now going to transition to Allison, and she's going to provide us some updates around our correctional facilities.
Okay. So good morning. My name is Allison Losi, and I do IDEA compliance in DC's 3 correctional facilities: the DC Jail, or IYP, Youth Services Center, or YSC, and the DYRS facility at New Beginnings, Maya Angelou Academy. I wanted to let everyone know that as of October 1st, there will be new education providers at both the DC Jail and Youth Services Center. DCPS is currently the LEA, but on 10/1, the LEA responsibilities will transfer to 2 different agencies. The names of the schools will be changing, and the records requests will be coming from different folks as well. So Maya Angelou Public Charter School will be the LEA at the jail, currently called IYP. DYRS will be the public agency responsible for K-12 education and FAPE at YSC. That'll be just like what happens at the DYRS facility, New Beginnings in Laurel. This information will also be going out in the LEA Look Forward. Feel free to reach out to me with questions either via my email or in the chat. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that update, Allison. We're going to now turn it over to Dawn, and she's going to share some updates around child outcome summary.
Good morning. My name is Dawn Hilton. I am the 619 Preschool Special Ed Coordinator here at OSSE. I would like to share a brief reminder about the Child Outcome Summary, COS, June Checkpoint Follow-Up. OSSE conducted a review of all Child Outcome Summary data submitted in DC CATS as part of the June COS Checkpoint. LEAs were notified by email of any found discrepancies and asked to address these discrepancies and make all necessary corrections in DC CATS by September 10th, 2021. If corrections were if corrections were needed, OSSE uploaded a list of children and the noted discrepancies into your LEA's OSSE box account, along with a Part B 619 COS exit data verification certification form. For any LEA who has received an email notification and has not yet addressed the list of discrepancies and returned a signed verification form, please do so within the next few days. If you have any questions about COS data submission process, you may contact our team at the email address provided here in this slide. Next slide, please. The second thing I would like to discuss with you is not related to COS. However, it is equally as important. I would like to discuss transferred referrals for children under the age of 6. Beginning in April 2021, as children completed stage 4 enrollment for the 2021-2022 school year, special education referrals were transferred from DCPS early stages to charter LEAs. Additionally, Strong Start began inviting charter LEAs to Part C transition planning conferences for children who were stage 4 enrolled. I would like to remind you to log all referrals in SEDS upon receipt and or as soon as you gain access to the child's records in SEDS. Please note that special education referral date is not the date your LEA receives access to the student's record in SEDS. Instead, if a transferred referral has an active referral acknowledgement in SEDS, then the child has an active timeline, and the receiving LEA should complete the remaining steps of the initial evaluation process within that set timeline. If a referral is transferred to your LEA without written documentation, such as a written referral or signed consent form, then the new LEA would use the date of notification as the child's referral date. For example, if an LEA receives an email from early stages on August 18th, 2021, and in that communication, there isn't a referral acknowledged and SEDS, and early stages does not give you a signed consent to evaluate form, then August 18th is the date of the referral and should be entered in SEDS as such. For children transitioning from IDEA Part C early intervention to Part B, the invitation from Strong Start to a child's Part C transition conference is the referral date to special education and should be entered in SEDS as such. No matter the situation, it is important to remember that your LEA must complete reasonable efforts to obtain parent consent within the first 30 days of the referral, and these efforts must begin within 10 business days from receipt of that referral. All efforts should be documented in the child's SEDS record and noted in the communication log. If you have any questions about this process, please do not hesitate to contact me. My email address is dawn.hilton1@dc.gov. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dawn. We are now going to transition to our non-public team, and Tony is going to share some updates and reminders from non-public upcoming trainings and webinars.
Great morning, everyone. My name is Tony Lemons, and I want to give a few reminders and updates with regard to the non-public monitoring team. The first one is regarding a upcoming webinar. It's a Start of School webinar that is non-public school focused. However, we highly encourage LEAs to participate in the webinar, as we'll be discussing some reporting requirements, not only to OSSE, but also requirements for reporting to LEAs. Some of the webinar will focus on monitoring and oversight requirements, as well as some COVID-19 specific requirements. In order to register for this session, you can utilize the link that is in the handout here, or you may look out for an additional link and additional information that will be in the LEA Look Forward. In addition to that information, we just want to give a brief reminder with regard to correction of noncompliance that was identified for students attending non-public schools during the 2020-2021 school year. The reports have been released in their final stage as of August this year. We are now in the correction window of noncompliance. While we typically provide 1 year for correction, we do encourage LEAs to correct those items as soon as possible. The earliest correction for period 1 is March 7th, period 2, May 26th, and period 3 is August 15th. So if you have any specific questions with regard to what is required for correction of that noncompliance, you may reach out to myself, Tony Lemons, or LaShonda Wilson with any questions regarding correction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tony. We will now transition to Mike, and he is going to provide us some updates around assessments and alternative assessment eligibility process.
All right, thank you, Tiffany. Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Craig. I serve as the assessment specialist for special populations in OSSE. So I just want to give you some updates and some reminders about the alternate assessment eligibility process for this school year. So each year, an alternate assessment is administered annually in the District of Columbia. Alternate assessments are administered in the following assessments. So we have our multi-state alternate assessment, also known as MSAA, and that's in ELA and mathematics. For students in grades 3 through 8 and 11, we have our dynamic learning maps, also known as DLM, which is our alternate science assessment for students in grades 5, 8 in high school biology. And then we have our alternate access assessment for students in grades 1 through 12, and that's for our English learners. OSSE will be making determinations for students in grades 3 through 12, and IEP teams will make determinations for students in grades K through 2. Next slide, please. So each year, the alternate assessment process, OSSE does a review. So for this year, in order to be determined eligible or for your student to be reviewed, we must have a current IEP on file in SEDS. The DC alternate assessment participation decision documentation form must be completed as well. This is a part of the student's IEP, so this form should be completed during the annual IEP meeting, and all documentation to support the alternate assessment decision should be uploaded in SEDS as well. So that can be examples such as a current psychological evaluation no more than 3 years old, computer-based intervention data, related service provider, observation, evaluation, achievement test data. So any data sources that will support the claim for an alternate assessment. Next slide, please. All right, so to be deemed eligible for alternate assessment participation, the student must meet the following minimum requirements. They must have a significant cognitive disability. They must be learning standards linked to the Common Core State standards, the Next Generation Science standards, and or the WIDA English Language Development standards. And the student must require extensive, direct, individualized instruction and support throughout the school year. Again, these are the minimum requirements. Like I stated before, OSSE will conduct a review of the student's file in SEDS and then make a final determination if the student is found eligible for alternate assessment participation. Next slide, please. So here's a high-level overview of what LEAs and schools should be doing. The deadline for alternate assessment applications is October 15th. That is conducted in SEDS. OSSE would conduct a review of the student's file in SEDS from October 18th to November 19th. By November 22nd, LEAs will receive the determinations for students that have applied for alternate assessment. There will be an appeals window from November 22nd through December 17th. And then if any determinations for appeal students will be received on January 10th. But by November 22nd, all LEAs will receive their final determinations of students that were found eligible for alternate assessment participation for this school year. Next slide, please.
That's your final slide, Mike.
Thanks so much.
Okay, if folks have any questions about alternative assessment eligibility, feel free to add those to the chat. Mike is here to answer any questions as well that teams may have around this process. We're now going to turn it over to Brian from our Department of Transportation, our transportation team, and just sharing update and guidance around transportation for this school year. Brian?
All righty. Good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Gober. I'm a management analyst here with the data technology team in the division of transportation. Myself and other team members, we provide technical support for our Tote system, transportation online tool for education. Preparing for this current school term, please make sure your calendars and your TRFs, transportation request forms, are accurate. This will ensure our routing is efficient as well as stable. For the calendar, the important items on the calendars are the bell times, especially your instruction start time. We route 30 minutes before the instruction start time. So for example, if your start time is 8:30, we're going to schedule the bus to arrive starting at 8 o'clock. And between 8 o'clock and 8:20 will be the on-time window. For your cohort, most schools are doing in-person all 5 days of the week, so you don't have to worry too much about that. Exception days, this will let us know the holidays, your Thanksgiving breaks, professional development days, as well as your early dismissal days. For the TRFs, please make sure that the attending school and the program calendar are correct, as well as the cohort. The cohort has to match up with the calendar for that attending school. Next slide. All right. Considerations, decisions for this current term. For your students, please make sure the data on the IEP contains accurate information. We pull this data into our system, so things like wheelchair, harnesses. If the student requires nursing assistance or one-to-one aid, please make sure that is on the student's IEP. Any changes to the IEP will take 24 hours to reflect in our Tote system. So just keep that in mind. Any delays, we will provide parent reimbursement, but I'll go over those in other slides. We have an updated bus safety kit, which is provided at the link at the bottom. And this will go over 3 main topics: student and staff safety. This includes disinfecting the bus, cleaning, temperature checks, things like that. Parent, school, and stakeholder communication and education information, as well as our new division rebranding. All the buses have been changed to with the logo District of Columbia Student Transportation. Next slide. All right. So our guidance right now, we're currently on our 10 business day routing policy. So any transportation requests that have been submitted, we have up to 10 business days to route that student. So just keep that in mind. Okay. Next is the in-person start date. So this will lets us know if your in-person start date is different from your calendar start date. But most schools, this will be the same. So don't need to worry about this. Next slide. We do offer LEA reimbursement for the first 20 days of the school year based off of these 3 criteria. The TRF must be submitted only for students that are new to the LEA, and the access is not gained or available in Tote in time for the TRF submission deadlines. Okay, next slide. And these are the forms that are required for LEA reimbursement. Your certification form, W-9, attendance record for the student, proof of mileage. And we also created a new secure upload process using Box. So any information, or if you would like the link, please send us an email at dot.data@dc.gov, and we'll provide you the secure link to upload your files. Okay, next slide. All right. In addition to LEA reimbursement, we also offer parent reimbursement. And this is based off of these 2 criteria. Transportation services that occurred as a result of failure on part of Aussie DOT to provide bus service, or the parent or guardian has chosen to transport the student themselves and receive authorization in advance from the director. Please call our Parent Resource Center at 202-576-5000 for more information regarding the parent reimbursement. Okay, next slide. Cohort. Okay. Tote training dates. We offer Oh, sorry. The cohorts will be in person all days of the week. So some schools are doing some hybrid. So just keep that in mind. We have some schools that are doing Monday through Thursday with a Friday virtual. So just keep that in mind. Next slide. And lastly, we do offer Tote training throughout the school year. You can register by clicking on the link, and it's through Microsoft Teams. Just keep in mind, if you're a brand new user to Tote, this training is required to gain access to our system. If you are a current user, you can also attend these trainings as a refresher. And the upcoming dates are September 22, October 6, October 20th, and November 3rd. Again, you can reach our team on our Tote support line at 202-576-5520 or email us at dot.data@dc.gov. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Brian. We are now going to transition to Jen from our teaching and learning team, and she is going to share a little bit about our upcoming professional learning opportunities and resources. Jen?
Hi, everybody. Let's go on to the next slide. Thank you. This is part marketing for our upcoming training and part update on our Students with Disabilities strategic priority. As many of you remember, we have been working towards improving outcomes for students with disabilities by disrupting processes and other forces, even outside of special education, that are driving disproportionate identification and exclusion for these students. Next slide, please. So many of the folks I can see on this call participated in a landscape analysis process starting in 2019, in which we looked at data describing students with disabilities and their experiences. We shared these findings with you and other stakeholders to gather your feedback and to make recommendations and to identify actions and investments. And to build a citywide agenda for accelerating outcomes for students with disabilities. So I want to share with you some of the actions and investments we're going to be taking this year. During our landscape analysis process, we identified some core barriers that we needed to overcome to improve student outcomes and increase equity, particularly for students with disabilities. Those areas included commitment and knowledge of leaders across the system, of general educators, and to increase special education staff capacity to serve students, and many other core barriers that we'll discuss in just a moment. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we're working with our partners at Digital Promise to develop content pathways and micro-credentials to address those barriers. The first one that we'll roll out will be the Foundations of Special Education, content pathways and associated micro-credential assessments. And I'll tell you more about those today, but I will tell you that the remaining three that you see here will be launching starting in January. And then in the spring and summer. And so we'll be rolling these out one at a time to make sure that you have access to the kinds of supports that will address the barriers that we identified through the landscape analysis process. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the first thing we're going to talk about is addressing two of those barriers: general educator commitment and training, and special education teacher capacity. Next slide. So one of the things that we are doing to address general education teacher capacity is to work on shifting some mindsets around serving the needs of all learners. We've partnered with Digital Promise to create a training series that focuses on learner variability. Rather than thinking about serving students with disabilities and those without, just recognizing that all students are unique and have unique needs, and that all teachers should be prepared to address those needs for the students that they are charged with serving in their classrooms. This series is made up of two synchronous webinar sessions. Between them, there's some asynchronous content so that you can do some application to your own teaching or leading. The links are on the PDF for these slides. You'll be able to register. Please share this with your general education colleagues and encourage them to attend. Digital Promise has been very flexible and interested in establishing relationships with any school that is would like to go a little deeper with this. So please do sign up and encourage your general education colleagues especially to take advantage of this opportunity. You see a quote here from Alexis Feliciano, who dug in over the summer to our pilot version of this and really got a lot out of it. Next slide, please. So let's think about addressing special education staff capacity. So we're going to be launching this year content pathway around Foundations of Special Education. And the first part of the Foundations of Special Education series will be focused on using data to develop and implement high quality IEPs. Starting in October, we'll be launching Intro to Special Education, which is framed around mindset, bias, and the special education process. Hopefully, taking this approach and framing in this way will help you to be prepared to address the equity concerns that Karen raised in her section. Course 2 will be focused on the IEP team and process. Starting in the the winter, in January, we will move into implementation and the provision of specialized instruction. And the use of evidence-based instructional methods to serve students with disabilities. Next slide, please. Participation in the Foundations of Special Education series should prepare you to successfully complete micro-credential assessments, for which you will earn a digital badge that is transportable, that you can add to your electronic resume, and also many PLUs. And so the first micro-credential will be offered starting in December, and it will be for those folks who have completed Content Pathways 1 and 2. It will be focused on IEP meeting, observation and reflection, and we'll move on from there as we move through our Foundations of Special Education series over this year and the next. Next slide, please. In the PDF for this presentation, you will be able to hit the links to register for each one of these modules. And just as this to save the date for the modules that will be offered starting in January of 2022. Next slide, please. Just a reminder, we have a wonderful Secondary Transition 101 series. It's led by Chelsea Kovacs from School Talk, and she is awesome. Please sign up for these sessions. And it's going to be offered 3 times this fall, so you have lots of options. All right, and as always, you can check out the TAL PD Bulletin to find more opportunities offered by the Division of Teaching and Learning. I hope to see you all at my trainings, and take care out there.
Thank you so much, Jen, for sharing those. It's a wealth of opportunities available for additional professional development. Of course, everyone knows if you've missed a webinar, we do have a web page here. You will be able to download a recording of this video in the next week, and also download our training materials and slides from this session as well. Our next webinar will be October 20th, 2021. And feel free to share the registration with other folks in your building who may need to hear this information. Christy, if you can help me with questions that we can, if there are any questions in the chat that maybe would be good to share overall with the group, any answers or questions that LEAs may have posed during our session today.
Sure. There was one point of clarification that I want to confirm, that if a student previously had a speech-only IEP and you add specialized instruction to that IEP, an initial provision of specialized instruction tracker must be completed on the first day that the student receives specialized instruction. I also want to remind you guys that you are required to provide specialized instruction on the first day that the student attends, so first day of stage 5 enrollment. So when you are documenting the first provision of specialized instruction, you want to make sure that the date of documentation, like the date that you were documenting, is consistent with the student's first day of stage 5 enrollment. I also forgot to mention this earlier, but OSSE is doing monthly monitoring on compliance with these requirements. So you may be hearing from us, from your monitors around these requirements. So it's, as you know, C2B transition is a high priority area for the district. So we are doing monthly monitoring on compliance with these requirements. There was a question around adding new users to SEDS. You're going to want to complete an OST ticket for that. So make sure you're submitting those OST tickets and also indicate like the account types that you need added and the contact information. I think that's all that needs to be shared out. If you have questions around who to contact for DOT, make sure that you are contacting. For Tote questions, there's the Tote support line. And for questions around a specific student's transportation, please contact the Parent Resource Center. The phone number for the Parent Resource Center is 202-576-5000. And the phone number for the Tote support line is 202-576-5520. I think that's all the questions that we had.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Christy, for helping out with those questions. And of course, we do download the questions after our call, and I do work to ensure any points of contact from any of the teams represented on the call today follow up with LEAs that have questions that may not have been answered during our question and answer session. I am going to now turn it over to Sarah from the Ability Challenge, and she is going to share her presentation around Excel.
We can skip to the next slide. Okay, so this is just talking about what it is that we're doing today. And I think the big thing for you guys to know, I know you've received a ton of information in the last hour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk quickly through the resource. And if you could like somehow register that this is going to go in the back of your head and that when you need it, it's there for you, then we've met our goal. So can you go forward to 2 slides? Okay, so as I was mentioning, we ran this community of practice. And the goal of the community of practice really was to bring folks together to talk about the challenges around running a special ed program in the midst of COVID, and also to focus on how to deliver specialized instruction in that context. And so, you know, about 3/4 of the way through the year, we started to think about how are we going to transition the information that we had been speaking about and working through to next year and also to everybody else in the city. And so what we did was throughout the year, we had been creating asynchronous sessions that went along with our live sessions in case folks had missed it. And what we decided at the end of this experience was we should put together online self-paced learning opportunities so that everybody has access to the materials that we worked with. And we really focused on bringing them, making them more relevant for the coming year, this year. And so that was sort of why we ended up creating them. Next slide. There are there's 2 different series. One is really focused on planning for recovery with the goal of focusing on students with disabilities and diverse learners. And the second one is more general about managing improvement and continuous improvement in special education. So they are both sort of standalone series. And then within each series, they also have a set of different modules that have videos and activities. Next slide. So this is the one slide that I feel like if you're going to pay attention to this one. This is how you can use it. Okay, so I would suggest clicking into the resource. There's a link in the PowerPoint and just clicking around. You'll see the two modules. There's accordion, I'm going to show it to you, but there's like accordion style clicks that you can go in to see each of the 4 different parts for each learning series. And then there's downloadable tools and resources. Each learning topic has activities associated with it. And they also have tools. So you can, you'll see, I'll flag a couple of them. You can use the modules to plan an initiative. So if you want to run through the entire thing, they're designed to take between 60 and 90 minutes, which I know is the luxury of time for most of you guys right now. But if you have a real interest in, say, running a continuous improvement initiative in your school, that is one way to work through the content. And then the other way to work through the content is to, after you've familiarized yourself with what's in there, you can pull out short videos. They're all really short, and they focus on bite-sized pieces of learning. We were calling them micro lessons. And then you can download activities. So if you're looking for an activity, for example, that you might use to sort of level set or introduce during a team meeting, there's a bunch of different activities in there about setting different priorities and thinking about your vision for recovery, those kinds of activities that could be really helpful to just turnkey or modify and present them to your team. Next slide. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go real fast through these, but here are the different parts for the first module, the planning for accelerated learning with diverse learners in mind. You guys can read through this, but essentially what this module does is it walks through why it's important to focus on specialized instruction right now, which you guys all on this call probably have in the center of your mind, but also thinking about specialized instruction in the context of all of the other COVID recovery priorities that you have on your plates. And so there are activities for thinking through what does it mean if you're focusing on things like specialized instruction in addition to all of the other, hundreds of things that you have on your to-do list right now. Next slide. This is one tool I just wanted to pull out for you guys. So we created this together with the members of the community of practice, and it has 2 different pages. One is an individual student recovery planning tool, and the other page is sort of more of a school-based planning tool that gets to what are the different interventions that your school is using to accelerate learning for young people. And it can be used for non-disabled students or students with disabilities. There's a few extra questions that get to looking at the IEP in the role of recovery, but essentially you can take this tool and then either use it or modify it based on what you're doing at your school. And hopefully it's a helpful resource to just think through, what do my students need? Where are they now? What are the interventions that we're going to put in place for them? And then, how long are we going to do this intervention? What do we expect to happen? And how are we going to share this information with others? Next. I'm going to skip this one. There's a video. If you like videos, it walks through an example of Diana and how a school might use the resources in the learning series to plan for Diana's return to school. So the second module, as I said, is about managing special ed improvement and really focusing on a continuous improvement model, which uses short cycles of improvement in order to learn from how you're making changes at your school, so that you can implement things on in a continual way. So it's really about implementing a change, looking at the data behind that change, adjusting course, or maybe changing course if that's appropriate, and then continuing that cycle over and over again. So this module is more about what is continuous improvement, how do you implement it, how do you write a really good problem statement so that you can think about honing a solution that meets the problem. Who do you want to have on your continuous improvement team, how to pick a solution, and then how do you actually turn it into action. Next slide. And these are the two tools that I wanted to just flag for you guys. One is an action plan for continuous improvement. Again, you can download it and change it and adjust it the way you want. And the other one is a tipping point consultancy protocol. And this is to anticipate potential hurdles and to think through how you might address each of the different things that you think could potentially be a barrier to your successful improvement initiative. And that walks through both sort of thinking about the hurdles in 4 different categories, but also how you might initiate plans to get through those hurdles. So this is more on once you've started to implement, as a leader, how can you manage the change so that your staff is successfully implementing the plan. Excuse me. All right, next slide. Okay, so keep going. This was good. That's the link. The next one. And this is going to be the part where I magically transitioned us to the web. So hopefully you guys can jump online after we're done and take a look for yourself. But this is what the web page looks like, and each series has the goal of the series, and then you'll see that accordion for each of the different parts. And so if you click into each of those, you'll see, next slide, the videos. And these are the, less than 5 minute, I think they're all less than 5 minutes, videos that really talk through the different content. Some of them are animations. You can watch them and email us and tell us what you think of our animation skills. Some of them are PowerPoints with voiceovers. And so you'll be able to click through if you have a few minutes and you're interested in a particular topic, or potentially if you have a staff member who needs more information, then you can direct them to these resources. Next slide. And then below each of the slides, each of the videos, you'll see the activity. One of the things that we came up with from our community of practice, we started with a needs assessment, and I'm sure this will come as no surprise to you, but there's just a lot of information out there. And part of what was expressed through the needs assessment was, we don't need more information, we just need the right information. And so what we've done in the activities is we've curated some links and resources to some of the additional information on each topic. And so in addition to an activity and a progression of different kinds of discussion questions, we also have note catchers, resources, and then those links to more information. So I just wanted to flag those as well. All right, we're not going to do the discussion because I feel like everybody's probably pretty done. But I will just say, feel free to ask questions in the chat. And really what I'm hoping is that you all will access this, use it as a resource, and let us know, how it's been helpful, what's missing, what else would be, advantageous for us to add to these. And really, we've made them with your feedback and for you to help facilitate what is a challenging time. And so we really want to make sure that we're continuing to be responsive to your needs. And I suggest that you guys visit our website as well and sign up for our newsletter, because we also have a ton of different tools that come out that could be helpful. So we just released one on what general educators need to look at in an IEP, and it sort of directs them to it's a tool and it directs them to the most important things. So that's my very fast speaking overview of what is in this learning series, and I will drop my email address in the chat and the link to the learning series so you guys have it. And I think there's 10 minutes left if folks have questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Sarah. If a school wants to reach out to you directly to maybe do some work with their team, if they're particularly interested in how they can kind of get everyone on board Gen and SPED and really going through the modules, is that possible if people reach
Absolutely.
out? Okay.
Absolutely. I'm happy to help. I've been discussing with our contact at OSSE about how we can really turn these into usable, helpful resources. And so to the extent that you guys have questions or have ideas, please feel free to reach out.
Okay, perfect. I have looked, I don't see any questions in the chat. I will go back to the website for folks to access the Ability Challenge link. This would take them straight there. No need for login or anything, Sarah?
Nope, no need to do anything other than just click around.
Okay, perfect. So that is the link there.
One more thing is, if you don't like watching videos and you'd rather just have the PowerPoints, we've put them there. We've put all of the note catchers so you can just download it all if you prefer. Like, we tried to be as inclusive as we could about how we presented the material and just gave it all to you. So
yeah,
that's it for you, like.
Yeah, that's super helpful because us as adults, we are also diverse learners. So we learn in our own way as well. So whether video or in print, folks have a lot of different ways of how they learn. So we will also continue to share this information in future presentations, just as reminders to our LEAs to make sure they are accessing the website and getting the information and really encouraging their staff members to go through these modules and even finding ways to share it in their own PDs on their school level. So Sarah, we want to thank you so much for joining us this morning. We want to thank everyone who has stayed online to get this additional resource after our regular monthly webinars. Again, Sarah, if you want, your email address is, if you want to share for the group.
Yep, I dropped it in the chat. I think it should have gotten to everybody, but it's just Sarah with an H at theabilitychallenge.org. And if you do use it and you want to share with us how you use it, like, that would be great too. So we want to hear from you guys as well.
Okay, thank you so much. And we will continue to promote this resource throughout the school year to ensure our LEAs are accessing it. Thank you again, Sarah. Thank you everyone who has continued to stay on for our webinar this morning. And we thank you so much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Have a great rest of the day.